The action begins in the Shenmeng Beast sect. A certain man, turning to Ren, said that the day had come when the boy would create his golden core. But first he wanted to remind everyone of something. The first disciple of the sect listened to him attentively. The man praised his student, saying that he was the most talented guy he had ever taught. Perhaps the protagonist will be able to create a celestial beast core, and then he will gain a completely new power. Sect Master Yin Wanting was unable to create it at the time, and so the blonde man handed over Gu Yuan's spiritual core to him and asked him to bring glory to their sect. The man wished his student good luck and warned that the text needed to be read very carefully. The guy took note of this. Meanwhile, the rest of the students watched him closely. One of them, turning to his brother, asked if this was the manuscript of Yuhuang Juexian that he wanted. He wondered if his brother envied the boy, but he said he wouldn't envy an orphan. However, the master heard their conversation and loudly ordered them to remain silent. Instead of cultivating and developing, they threw mud at their comrade, which the man didn't like at all. A moment later he called them to follow him, saying that he had a task for them. They didn't argue and bowed in unison, but a second later, smiles appeared on their faces. Lingtian is the world where Xianmeng and all the other immortal sects are located. The strongest of them are the Miyao, Tianlingxi, Baihuamen, and Beast sects. In the distant past, the immortal master of all beasts opened a portal for animals and humans, and then conquered many other sects, making the Beast sect one of the 4 strongest. Many years later, the secret of the Heavenly Beast Core technique was revealed, and the sect's status grew even further. Meanwhile, the protagonist was diligently cultivating, but at some point he exhaled heavily. Turning to his beast, he noticed that it too was full of anticipation. The animal explained that an ordinary core would not satisfy him, and so Ren promised him to create what he originally wanted. His created core began to absorb power from the spiritual core. The process continued, and a peaceful atmosphere reigned all around. It was late evening outside, lit only by the stars, but suddenly this atmosphere was broken by a loud roar. The windows of the house were blown out and a golden beam of energy shot upward. In the released energy, the silhouette of a blue tiger was visible. The master felt tremors in the ground. He immediately realized that Ren had managed to awaken the beast's heavenly core, and so he rushed like a bullet towards his student. He in turn was glad that now he could please his teacher. Suddenly someone started breaking into his room. It was already night, and so the boy was surprised that his master had waited so long. But unfortunately it wasn't him, as the doors started to break down, and with such force that the guy was simply thrown back. Using only reflexes, he dodged the attack of the green tentacles. It was a technique of spiritual snakes devouring souls. However, he was able to dodge subsequent attacks, and later he decided to address the people who attacked him, asking who they were. But what worried him more was that they knew the techniques of the Beast sect. The enemies looked very gloomy, and green energy flowed through their bodies. Without saying a word, they pounced on Ren, and so he decided to test what the celestial core was capable of. And he immediately used the Jade Tiger destruction technique. Why did a strong explosion occur in the house? And one of the enemies, having come under attack, only cried out pitifully and flew away. Ren, in turn, carefully watched the battlefield. There was still one enemy left, who hastened to attack the guy from behind, but the Jade Tiger got to him too. Now he decided to find out who was hiding behind the mask. He extended his hand towards the kidnapper. However, a certain light appeared behind him, which he was forced to avoid. And when he landed on the ground, he saw a third man, but he looked much more menacing. And having lured Ren, he decided to retreat. The guy fell for the provocation and ran after the man. They moved at full speed across the roofs of buildings. The hero realized that he was leading him somewhere. In that direction were the Huisho cliffs, and a little later, they finally arrived at the place. The man suddenly stated that, not counting Ren, the last time the Heavenly Beast Core was created was by the founder of the sect, 573 years ago. So it would be a shame if the guy doesn't realize his potential. Suddenly the guy was overcome with fear and asked who the man was. He continued, saying that Ren would have achieved a lot in 100 years, but the sect could not wait that long. And so he hit the guy with his kui, which the hero successfully stopped. And a moment later there was an explosion. The man praised the boy for stopping a divine-level attack, even though he was only at gold level. Ren's fear was confirmed and he realized with horror the simple truth. His master was in front of him, and the guy suddenly started coughing up blood. He couldn't understand what was happening to him. The man explained that Gu Yuan's core contained qi energy that would turn into poison when in contact with snake qi. His master said that he wanted to obtain the heavenly core, but the guy wasn't going to give up so easily. The man only responded by saying that he was very sorry, and a moment later, he released his energy directly into the guy's body. He tried to resist, but nothing worked, and green energy entangled his core and pulled it out of his body. The guy resisted, but it didn't produce any results. But suddenly a blue tiger appeared in the air. With his mere presence, he destroyed the master's mask, and it also made him tense up. He was surprised that even outside the body, Ren's body's strength was enormous. The guy couldn't believe it and asked why the master was doing this. He also said that this is all for the sake of the sect. A second later, he heard someone's voices. The sect's disciples found their master and ran to help him. The man managed to pretend that Ren had attacked him, and his students in turn said that they arrived as quickly as they could. One of Ren's attackers, who was wearing a black mask, suddenly loudly declared that the guy had stolen a sect relic and then attacked the master. The master's accomplices wanted the hero to be executed. However, he suddenly turned to the guy, asking if he admitted his mistakes. The hero, in turn, began to fall into madness. He said the only mistake he made was trusting a cult. Ren attacked the master again, but he didn't even bat an eyelid. He regretfully stated that it was time to end it. He easily dodged the blow, and then released the energy from himself, and he touched the guy's body with his palm. A moment later, the hero flew off toward the cliff, and the master declared that, according to the rules of the sect, the wild beast must die of hunger. The guy was unconscious, and therefore could not soften his fall. However, in flight he came to his senses, and realized that his rage would burn forever, and his hatred would never disappear. Next time, he promised to take payment from Yin wanting in blood. Some time passed, and the mountain ranges began to be illuminated by the morning dawn, and the body of the fallen guy was noticed by a certain red snake. She crawled towards him, only to bite into the hand a second later and release poison. The guy started shaking and his veins started to bulge. However, this procession was interrupted by someone else. A huge hawk grabbed the guy, simultaneously catching a snake in its beak. But she was not going to give up and began to make shrill sounds. The hawk immediately realized his mistake. Orlin came across relatives of the same snake that bit the guy, but they were surprisingly impressive in size. And while the cold-blooded ones were dealing with the offender, Ren was falling down again. He rolled right over the rocks, and as a result, I came across a dragon that was sleeping peacefully among the mountains. The hero remained alive, and the last thing he saw was the huge paws of the great creature. The dragon, talking to himself, said in surprise that he had not met people for many years. The guy's body was weak, but he felt potential in it. What especially surprised the creature was that Jen still contained residual energy from the beast's heavenly core. Deciding to help him, the dragon poured some of his energy into him. After all, if the body is capable of creating a celestial core, then perhaps it will be able to free the creature from this cage. At this time, Ren was watching the worst nightmares of his life. He relived the moment again and again when the fruits of his labors were taken from him. And then they left us with nothing, but he still came to his senses. And suddenly I realized that I couldn't feel my hand at all, but still he remained alive. The voice behind him was surprised that the boy was still able to smile. However, Ren did not understand whose voice it was, and therefore ordered him to show himself. The dragon warned the boy not to be afraid. The hero feared for his life, and therefore prepared for anything. But suddenly his face changed from angry to surprised. A beautiful girl with horns appeared in front of him and said that the guy probably already knew who she was, but he really didn't understand what was happening. The girl reassured him that she doesn't eat people without energy. However, a second later, something in the guy's reaction confused her. She immediately lay down in front of him, asking what he dreamed about. And because she got too close, Ren became embarrassed. She was surprised by how people reacted when she was in this form. And, having assumed her true form, she asked menacingly if she was scary. But a second later his body turned back into a human one, and the guy finally realized who it was. The girl introduced herself as Ju, and she said that she understood that the hero had a lot of questions, but she wanted to ask something. She didn't understand how he ended up here, because only dying animals come here to meet their last minutes in silence. He only replied that he had been betrayed and defamed, and the girl, in response to this, unexpectedly offered to make a deal so that the hero could restore cultivation and take revenge. Ren immediately agreed, and Ju looked at him with interest. She was surprised that he was not afraid of being deceived. However, the guy said that he wasn't even fit to eat, which meant that she was unlikely to deceive him. The girl found this interesting, and so, a second later, she called upon some kind of energy weave and asked to give her a hand. And reciting some mantra, she placed her hand in front of the guy's hand. Her gaze turned into a white veil, and the energy created by the weaving began to be absorbed into Ren's body. Then a certain core appeared in his head. He entered the world of his consciousness and asked why the girl decided to enter into an agreement with him. She justified this act by saying that she was in a good mood. Finally, they began to make a pact, and the dragon warned that she was one of the most terrible beasts in this world. It is different from all the ones he has used, and its shape will depend on the guy's desires. At this time, Ren's body and mind were pierced by terrible pain, But compared to the betrayal, it was just a trifle for him. And inside his belly, changes began to occur, as a core began to form. The girl, analyzing his condition, realized that he lived only thanks to his willpower. She also knew what betrayal was, and therefore understood it well. Today their bodies and lives would be intertwined, and she promised to protect him. And only a month later, their ritual was completed. It was so long that the birds managed to build a nest on the guy, but suddenly he opened his eyes, and he burst into an angry cry that went through the mountains. Finally, his inner core was formed, and the meridians and arm were restored. Suddenly he realized that stones were starting to fall on him. Because of his cry, pieces of rock fell off and tried to fall right on the guy's head. He immediately panicked and tried to run out of that place. A passage could be seen in one of the walls. Having run out of it, he noticed an abyss beneath him, and once again he had to endure a hard fall. After flying several dozen meters, he landed flat on the ground. He turned to Ju and said that he was completely healthy. But before finishing his question, Ren noticed a red snake behind him. It was the same one that almost took his arm off. However, it was foolish to think that the guy had not changed at all, and therefore he caught her with ease. The snake decided to call the gang again, and from behind the forest a horde of titanic-sized snakes rose up. Ren was confident in his own strength, and so he provoked them by killing a fellow cold-blooded. This made them furious. However, just one jerk and blow showed how huge the difference was between them. The head of one of the snakes exploded, and the guy landed calmly down. He felt a force seething within him, and so he told Ju that he wanted to go to the sect right away, but she said that there was no need for them to hurry. Ren didn't understand this. A moment later, a deafening howl was heard in the area. He turned sharply towards the sound and saw a figure on the rock. The girl explained that this would be the guy's first step towards revenge. After all, he needed to defeat the defender of the Wansho Valley. This sight frightened Ren, and he suggested that the dragon take another road, but she said that there was none. Meanwhile, 3 months passed, during which the hero mastered his strength. Now he was meditating, concentrating on her. The girl played with the birds and said that the guy was progressing quickly. However, if he wants to master the true power of his inner core, he needs to understand how to fight. He suddenly paused, starting to stand up, and saying that he was used to some weapons, energy began to swirl around his hand. He began to remember all the techniques that he had learned throughout his entire adult life, and a glove appeared on his hand. Ren decided to test it right away, and just one blow shattered the stones into dust, simultaneously lifting the tree into the air. He thought it turned out pretty well, but the girl removed the energy from his hand, saying that this would not work. In her opinion, the technology was stupid. After all, they can unite into one body, and then the power of the technique will increase hundreds of times. If they achieve divine fusion, then his will shape the world. But to do this, she will have to help him a little. And without ceremony, she flew straight into his head, and later she took control of the body and said that she would show true power. Energy immediately appeared around the guy's body. He took a stance and prepared for the blow, and stretching out his hand forward, a deadly tornado burst out of it, which simply annihilated everything living and non-living. This blow, in turn, did not go unnoticed by the keeper of the forests. The girl left the guy's body, and he looked in surprise at the extent of the destruction. He didn't think she was that strong, so he asked what she was doing at the bottom of that valley. The girl explained that her power does not work without a conductor. Over these 3 months, the guy had become quite proficient with his powers, and had reached the gold level, so he could go and say hello to their friend. However, he showed up himself. Noticing the guy, he looked at him sarcastically. The hero decided to retreat, and the girl explained that Ju Yan was a formidable opponent and needed to be attacked in his weak spots. She also explained that there is no fur on his stomach, and that the core is located there. She wanted to add something, but she was interrupted. The gorilla made a high jump and landed right in front of the guy. The monster was tens of times larger than the guy, and the girl added that if they finished him off, they would be able to absorb his core. They will both become stronger and possibly gain some abilities. The monster turned to Ju and said that they would not go anywhere, even if the girl wanted to find that very man. The guy made a mental note about a certain person. Although the gorilla wanted to avoid conflict, since the affairs of animals do not concern humans, Ren had a different opinion. He decided to get down to business, and having merged with Ju, he went on the attack. But Ju Yan's counterattack flew past the guy. He was surprised by the boy's agility, and then he said out loud that he had underestimated Ren. However, this played into his hands, because the hero immediately launched into a series of blows. Hiding behind bursts of energy, he launched attacks from unexpected places. However, the gorilla was protecting its weak points, so the hero needed to distract its attention. After another blow, Ju Yan burst into a scream. He attacked the ground, forcing the boy to dodge. Jen had no choice but to run away, and the girl said the obvious thing like, the hero can't win with brute force. Meanwhile, the gorilla began to beat his chest, saying that they could not defeat him. A moment later, he rushed into the attack. The guy also did not waste time and saw an opening for an attack. While Zhu Yan was trying to hit him, he exposed his weak spot, which is what Ren took advantage of. He gathered energy in his hands, directing it straight into the beast's belly. However, this had little effect on him, and a rising leg began to be visible nearby, which hit the guy with such force that he flew into the stone like a bullet. But he survived, because the last 3 months were not in vain. Zhu Yan became furious at such impudence, and therefore decided to play his trump card. The energy from his body formed a fireball that burst out of his mouth straight at the hero. Ren had nowhere to dodge, so he took the attack head-on. His muscles groaned and energy was pouring out of his body, and a second later there was an explosion. The guy was able to avoid the blow, but was extremely surprised that the gorilla could fight like that, despite having been hit in a weak spot. Zhu Yan decided not to limit himself to one shot. The energy in Ren's body ran out, and so the girl suggested that he hand over control to her, but he was in no hurry to do this. He had a plan that was based on the feelings he had had earlier, when he was on the brink of life and death. And even though the gorilla was hit by a fireball, her face suddenly twisted. She was surprised at what Ren had suddenly turned into. Their merger has moved to a new level, and now it was his turn to attack. And so, a moment later, he made a quick dash forward. He ignored Zhu Yan's swing, and the fist was getting closer and closer to him. However, Ren knew his abilities, and so he easily deflected the gorilla's paw with his blow. The old keeper tried to attack him, but nothing worked, so the guy decided to end it, and making a sharp lunge, he pierced the beast's belly. He flew away several tens of meters, and he found himself pinned to the ground because he suddenly ran out of strength. However, Ren decided not to stop, and therefore began to strike that place repeatedly. The gorilla could only spit blood from such pressure, and having finished the series of attacks, the guy suddenly jumped off the beast, and so he concentrated, directing the energy into his entire body. He decided to strike with the same tornado that had just picked up Zhu Yan's body and shot it somewhere into the distance. The energy swirled through the forest and carried the gorilla's body into the rock. The guy ran up to him and stood in front of the keeper. He asked the girl if they had succeeded, and his transformation began to wear off. The girl turned into a humanoid and hugged him, calling him master and saying that he had done well. A little later, the boy began to regain his strength, and the dragon began to extract the core from the gorilla. It looked like a golden apple. And a moment later, the girl approached Ren to push the core into his mouth. Having swallowed the animal's power, the hero began to cultivate. Meanwhile, the sky began to become covered with clouds, only to burst into lightning a minute later. She hit Ren straight, but the thunderstorm that had stepped onto this spot evaporated, and the guy exhaled steadily. Now, with this spiritual core, the hero could use a third of the dragon's power. He was able to reach the top of the Golden World level. Now it's the turn of the Beast Sect. And by chance, one of the disciples of this sect stood on the cliff of Huishou. He saw lightning and thought that some beast had surpassed the golden core. And looking down, he saw a figure climbing straight up the cliff. He immediately recognized this face. Ren ran along the steep cliff and greeted his old friend. The boy with green hair couldn't believe his eyes. After all, he thought that Xiaoren had already died a long time ago. The hero told him that there was nothing surprising about this. However, the sect disciple was more puzzled as to why Ren had returned after betraying him. The last words made the guy angry. After all, his cultivation was destroyed, and the beast's heavenly core was taken away. But his friends said that Ren was picked up as an orphan, and he repaid them by betraying and attacking the master. The girl was surprised at how skillfully he wrapped everything up, but she was sure that this would not shake her master's resolve. But she didn't know him that well, because he immediately became furious, deciding to pounce on Nangon Kushui. After ordering him to shut up, the guy ran off, and he took advantage of the moment and slipped away. The hero's blow missed, and the body began to fall back down the cliff. However, Ren immediately dug his feet into the ground, forcing them to pass through the stones. And then he immediately bounced off the flying boulders and rushed towards the guy. The sect disciple, in turn, decided to resort to the power of Qi, and green poison snakes immediately flew out of his hand. The hero also resorted to energy, and an explosion occurred between them. Ren realized that his acquaintance had already reached the top of the golden core, and he realized that their strength was equal. It just didn't add up in his mind, because to achieve such a level, he needed secret techniques from his master, and Ren himself achieved such strength. However, the guy believed in himself, because the hero had already lost the celestial core. He then attacked him with a dash of the spiritual snake, but Ren easily intercepted the green snake. However, his opponent began to pour a huge amount of energy into the technique, and the single snake split into many smaller ones. All of them, with one impulse, tried to catch the main character with their fangs. Although Ren was able to repel most of them, there were still opponents behind him. He was unable to react to them in time. And then there was a loud explosion. And his enemy already thought that this attack was the last one, and Ren could not possibly survive after it. However, suddenly a voice was heard from a place that was shrouded in impenetrable haze. He managed to cover himself with armor so that he didn't miss the blow. The girl advised the hero to control his anger, because in reality, that boy did not pose a threat to him. The hero answered her that he could handle it himself, but his enemy could not understand who he was talking to. But this didn't interest him much, because he immediately went on the attack. Numerous blows, manifested in the form of lime snakes, passed the hero by. And during one of these attacks, Ren caught his opponent, and with one clenched fist he broke his limb. His face twisted, and he promised to give his opponent life if he helped him uncover Yin Wanting's true identity. But the poisonous guy began to disintegrate before his eyes. He said that Ren was not a danger to the beast sect, and then used the snake escape technique. Later, he found himself 10 meters away from the hero. He explained his previous phrase by saying that Ren was just a mediocrity, and therefore he would not be able to compete with the master. In his opinion, the hero is just a stone in his path. After this, he immediately manifested his energy into the outside world. His strength was truly impressive, because Zhu Yan himself did not possess anything similar. Suddenly, the protagonist's opponent bowed and told the master that he was already on his way. Apparently, he was contacted and therefore decided to postpone the fight. Ren tried to catch up with him, but it was unsuccessful. After all, he again used the snake escape and disappeared into the poisonous liquid. And although Ren could have dealt with the guy with Zhu's help, he still didn't want to show all his trump cards. Then he decided to go to the beast sect. But the girl was extremely worried about this, because Ren had not yet learned to control his anger. Meanwhile, the beast sect was in complete disarray. The girl noted that the sect had apparently been destroyed. But Ren refused to believe it. And yet, apparently no one has been here for a long time. The guy didn't want to put up with this. Although Zhu was worried that he might not succeed. However, he didn't care about this either, because he wanted revenge here and now. But his impulse was immediately stopped by the girl. The beast sect had become much stronger, so the hero needed to prepare. She chose him because he was able to create a celestial beast core. And because his master took the core, he was clearly able to transcend the imaginary world. And even that guy with the snakes could kill them. But even so, the hero was not going to retreat. Then the girl said that she would have to save him. At first he didn't understand what she was talking about, but then he was running through the meadows and forests at full speed. She took possession of his body and said that once they reached the Wanshou Valley, the body would become his. After some time they arrived, and Zhu asked Ren not to be angry. She also decided to interest the guy by noticing one problem in his strength. And it worked. However, Zhu demonstratively looked away, and Ren felt embarrassed by such games. But she still began to speak, and said that the hero's soul was connected with another beast. She smells him, and realizes that he has not yet merged with the core. Therefore, while Ren has time, he must train. She said that there were many strong animals in the valley, and then she felt someone. The guy immediately thought that this was someone from the beast sect, and they immediately set off on their journey. After some time, the girl warned the guy that they were already close. It turned out to be a certain girl who was running from a monster. She cried and thought that she didn't want to die, but later she simply tripped over a stone and fell. It was a decisive moment when she could have died, but the hero immediately saved her. The girl thought that she was in a fairy tale, and the hero saved her. And while she was lost in her fantasies, the guy turned to her. But I realized that she had lost consciousness. Zhu smiled and asked Ren how it felt to be a prince on a white horse. However, their jokes were interrupted by a monster that survived the attack. Zhu explained that it was a demonic moon leopard that could not speak to people, but was at the top of the golden world. But Ren was glad to meet another worthy opponent. Meanwhile, the beast was already going on the attack. However, the guy easily reflected all the energy waves sent at him. And then he himself went on the offensive. His blow was aimed straight at the monster but missed it, or even disappeared altogether. However, it was the beast's technique that split into multiple copies a moment later. The girl offered him her help, but she also said that the guy needed to train, and that's why he wanted to handle it himself. And all the copies of the leopard immediately pounced on him. The guy unleashed a series of blows, dodging and attacking everyone who approached. His technique was like a tornado that scattered everyone around. However, the leopards were much stronger, and after counting them, he noticed that one was missing, which immediately emerged from underground and attacked the hero. Ren couldn't cope, so he asked Zhu for help, and a moment later, a terrible roar echoed through the forest. After being hit, the leopards scattered in all directions, and the hero moved at a speed that was beyond the capabilities of even leopards, and there were fewer and fewer of them. Not wanting to die, they still tried to retreat. But Ren immediately dealt with everyone and captured the last leopard, and a moment later he pulled out the beast core from it, and throwing down the corpse, he lingered his gaze on the core. A moment later, he swallowed it, and the sensations were very different from last time. Ju explained that each beast has its own strength, just like cultivators. Meanwhile, the rescued girl began to wake up. She was surprised to find herself alive. A second later, Ren jumped up to her and began to question her diligently. She immediately thought that he was going to harass her, but he immediately explained that she was attacked by a leopard, from which he saved her. The girl immediately apologized to him and introduced herself as Qin Lei. She was a follower of the 100 Flowers sect. Xiaoren also introduced himself, but said that he was not a member of any party. For some reason, his name surprised her greatly. A little later there was thunder and a heavy downpour began. Meanwhile, the two teenagers had settled down in a wide cave. They made a fire to wait out the bad weather. Meanwhile, the girl was wondering if this was really that same Xiaoren. However, he didn't look like a man who would betray the sect. Meanwhile, Ju mentally informed Ren that the girl was looking at him too closely. But the hero was thinking about something else. He said that his companion was right, because without her powers, he would have died. Yin Wanting had already announced that he had betrayed the sect, and therefore everyone would soon start hunting him. The anger that filled him caused the branch in his hand to split. The fire flared up from the energy that surged into it, and the girl was frightened by this. Ren, leaving somewhere, explained that he would return soon, and she thought that he didn't look like a bad guy, but he still looked fierce. Left alone, she began to reflect on the house. She missed her soft bed very much, and in her fantasies she lost track of time. Ren was already sitting in front of her and frying food, and holding out a piece, he offered her something to eat. She, in turn, was very happy about this, and the smell made her get down to business faster. Now she refused to believe that Ren was a bad person. She was surprised by how free the boy felt in the wild. He only said that he had been living here for several months. This surprised her even more, and Ren explained that at first he didn't think he could survive. The girl, in turn, added that her teacher said that only a person with a pure and kind heart can prepare delicious food. That's why she wanted to hear the story of how the guy betrayed the sect, and then tell the teacher so that she could reconcile them with the leader. She noted with a smile that she was cute. However, the guy did not understand what she meant by the word leader. The girl said that recently there was a meeting of all the sects, and the master of the beast sect was chosen as their leader, since she is the strongest. She heard that this happened because their master was able to create a heavenly beast core. The boy's rage caused the fire to rise even higher, and the meat in his hand was completely burnt. He was extremely angry that his heavenly core had helped Yin capture Xianmen. The girl was surprised and did not understand why he called the core his own. That's why Ren decided to tell the story of how it really happened. Meanwhile, the action moved to the new temple of the beast sect. The green-haired boy reported to the master about Xiaoren, and he sat thoughtfully and listened to the report. But the guy with green hair was suddenly pulled up by his clothes by his friend, who didn't understand why he didn't kill Ren on the spot. He explained that the call of the master was much more important than the death of that mediocrity. However, the leader stopped them, asking Chu Shui if he really saw Xiaoren. He confirmed it. The master could not understand how the hero survived. Li Jian volunteered to destroy that boy, but the master stopped him, saying that they needed to solve pressing problems, and that Ren should only be killed if he got in the way. They obediently agreed with him. Then the blonde asked if he was able to injure Chu Shui, and having received consent, he asked the guy not to blame himself, because the master would soon give him an important task. But first he needs to take a rest. The blonde thought that he felt sorry for Xiaoren, because he could have become an obedient student, but he turned out to be too talented, and if he lays low, he will be spared, but otherwise he will not live. The very next day Ren decided to move out, and the girl behind him was sobbing. She believed the guy's story and felt very sorry for him. He was very surprised by how easily they believed him. And Zhu, watching this, burst out laughing and asked the guy what he thought, whether the girl was stupid or just kind. The hero turned to his new acquaintance and said that she needed to leave here, because the Wanshou Valley was a dangerous place. However, she said that she had a very important mission. She came here to catch an animal for her master, because her birthday is coming soon. And when asked what kind of animal she wanted to catch, she said that she was looking for a golden-haired jade vibrating bird. This made both the hero and his companion extremely surprised. However, the girl immediately stated that if Ren was afraid, she would do it herself, since she had bought a map of the valley. She said that the previous owner of this map said that his ancestor drew it at the cost of his life, and therefore asked for 5,000 immortal stones. The hero was extremely surprised by this, and the girl, trying to calm him down, said that she had only bargained down to 3,000. However, Ren and his companion decided not to say anything, as their conscience would then torment them. and so they all set off on a journey together. Ju warned the guy that the girl had something else besides the map that needed to be sorted out. He put his hand to his head and said he would do it. The girl turned to the two of them and said that she felt that there was someone else here besides the two of them. The hero justified himself by saying that insects might have flown onto her, but she looked at him with distrust. Suddenly she noticed something and asked to look, and if you believe the map, then that same bird should have been in front of them. At that moment, Ju thought that ghostly birds must gather here, and suddenly some symbols began to appear in the air in front of them. The girl recognized them as holy writings, and this probably meant that the bird would appear soon. The hero and Ju did not understand what was happening, so they simply ran after Chin. Ren turned to his companion and said that he didn't trust the map, but she said that they needed it for cultivation. Meanwhile, he ran to Chin, and from behind the bushes they saw a bird. She was really here, and golden letters were floating under her feet and in the air. The girl thought the bird was very beautiful, and she suddenly noticed them. And then she screamed, tearing the earth with her cry, which was directed at people. They in turn tried to defend themselves. Chin rushed to attack, saying that this breeze would not stop her. The hero tried to stop her, but she had already taken out a certain bottle, saying that its fire would deal with the bird. And she immediately sent fire beads at the animal. They headed towards the bird, but it created a barrier in front of itself with its cry, and the fireballs began to die down. The girl realized that the bird had simply blown away her equipment, so she had to bring back her spiritual fire, which immediately rushed into her bottle. Now their battle was moving to a new round, and the guy at this time watched and thought whether to interfere or not. Ju also noted that Ren apparently knew nothing about this bird. Rumor has it that the first golden-voiced jade-vibrating bird appeared after a priest's sermon. She is a rare spiritual being who can turn the words of saints into weapons, thereby striking the soul. And this monster was really dangerous. Then the guy wanted to intervene, but Ju stopped him. She said that the bird had little spiritual wisdom, and therefore it was unlikely to withstand another blow. But if they interfered, the bird would become useless without its energy. The girl took out another bottle and lured the bird. However, she clearly didn't want to go anywhere. Now Chin summoned two elements, taking the situation seriously. She attacked with a combined attack of water and fire, and a dragon-like technique headed towards the bird. She, in turn, also used something that was capable of protecting her. And so it happened. The water dragon mixed with fire was destroyed against an invisible wall. The letters did not allow him to go further. The girl was surprised that even the combination of fire and water was powerless here. Then the bird decided to attack itself. The Holy Scriptures immediately rushed towards the girl, and she fell into unconsciousness and began to scream hysterically. The bird grinned and looked at the pathetic man. However, because of this, she sensed Ren's approach too late, and yet she managed to dodge, and later she attacked, forcing the hero to tense up. But Ren already had a plan. He turned one of his gloves into a shield, which he used to protect himself from the attack. His next shot was also wide, but the shield immediately turned into something else, and the guy was able to hit the animal with the suddenly manifested blade. However, this wound was not enough, so Ren was immediately carried back. He retreated as far away from the enemy as possible. Meanwhile, the bird was going into a frenzy. It was a pity that he couldn't hit her with one blow, but with the wound she couldn't run away now. Suddenly the girl woke up from oblivion, and she didn't understand what had happened to her. She saw a wounded bird that was trying to escape from here, but Ren didn't want to give her such an opportunity. And so he immediately multiplied, like that leopard, and the whole crowd headed towards the wounded animal. The girl was very surprised by such a reception. This technique, in her opinion, was extremely similar to the technique of monsters, and at that moment several gens were trying to get the bird. She dodged them all, but one of them still caught her off guard. That's why she didn't run away, but simply attacked from the air. A symbol appeared in the air, and immediately flew towards the copy of Ren, and he didn't even have time to react. And a second later he disappeared into thin air. The wounds on the clones were reflected on the guy's body, and therefore he immediately lost a lot of strength. However, the bird also had no vitality left. The boy suddenly saw a beam of water rushing after the bird. He struck her in the back, and she was unable to resist, and fell nearby. The girl was finally able to use her technique and catch the animal herself. Apparently the bird's latest attacks were too much for her, but a silhouette suddenly jumped out of the haze. The guy noticed this, and the bird, which managed to survive and retain consciousness, began to use its latest technique, and she flew to Chin. However, Ren arrived just in time, and he decided to strike back. Taking a stance, he raised his hand and gathered chi in it, to use Lan's fatal blow a moment later, breaking the bird's technique. She broke through all the barriers that were created, and she caught up with the animal. The girl tried to understand what kind of power it was. They were finally able to catch this naughty bird, but a moment later they saw the chicks. They surrounded their mother, and people thought it was quite cute. Chin bent down to touch the chicks, but their mother clearly showed that this was not worth doing. Ren stopped the girl, saying that if she continued, the bird might destroy its inner core to protect its offspring. Chin asked if the boy knew about the chicks, but he only found out about this when the girl managed to knock down the animal. The bird tried to escape and distract them from the chicks, but when she was shot down, she had to fight to the death. And if Chin provokes her, the animal will destroy everyone here. Meanwhile, the bird covered the little ones with its wings. Ju explained to the guy that this animal would not abandon its chicks, and therefore it would be impossible to catch her. She had decided to use the artifact. The sheet of paper with the inscription that was in her hand suddenly began to disappear, and several green rays rushed towards the bird. They enveloped her, and the wounds began to heal. The guy was extremely surprised by this. Chin said that she would not try to catch her any further, and therefore treated the wounds. She also gave the card away, saying that her teacher says that one must be able to express gratitude for help. Later, Chin approached the bird and said that she would not take it to the 100 Flowers sect. And Ju noticed that she looked very much like the hero. But one day, naivety and kindness can become their weaknesses. Meanwhile, Chin was running away from the bird, having previously tried to tear out its feathers. And Ren didn't understand why they needed this map if there were demonic writings on it. The companion explained that this was a prohibition placed on the map, and therefore it was necessary to use a special technique to read it. And a moment later, power vibrated around the hero's eyes. He put on glasses and finally saw everything, and Ju understood what kind of card it was. She said she could lead them to the treasure, and after some time they were able to reach the cave of 10,000 beasts. It had quite a complex terrain, and Ju explained that this was the place where she and those people from the legend lived. The place could only be found using a map, as huge changes had taken place. She also asked if the guy was worried about the girl who was left without a card. They had said goodbye earlier, and Chin had promised to tell her teacher about Ren's unfair treatment. And having taken the first step, she immediately fell. However, she asked not to worry about her. That's why Ren still thought that it would be difficult for her to get home. In response, Ju demonstratively took offense, saying that it was because her master was thinking about other women. A little later, Ren was looking at the map when a drop of water fell on it from above. And on the wet section of the map, a picture of Ju and a certain man suddenly began to appear. The girl was extremely surprised by this. And suddenly I understood how this map appeared. Several hundred years ago in this cave, she and the master met a man who was attacked by evil spirits. But the master, seeing that he was carrying an evil spirit's egg in his hands, became very angry and hated the cultivator with all his heart. However, it later turned out that it was an ordinary man who stole an egg for his dying wife. In the end, the master gave him medicine for his wife, and he painted this picture. And a little later they went further inland. The guy reached a certain passage and asked Ju to look. He asked if this was the place she was talking about. The girl confirmed his guess, and touching the door, she began to read the mantra, and she ordered the passage to open. The doors obeyed her, and the guy discovered something amazing inside. It was a bit empty inside, but there was some kind of energy swirling in the center. Ju invited the guy to come in. This was the residence of the dragon's previous owner. There was only one stone bed and a table. Ju suddenly began to say with annoyance that her master had once loved people, but one day he had experienced betrayal, and then lived in this cave with her. She also said that she chose Ren not entirely because he was able to create the heavenly beast core, because he and her master have the same destiny, which means she won't make any mistakes this time. Having finished her story, she invited Ren to go further. He was extremely surprised by what he saw, thinking that it was the coffin of a demonic beast. But Ju did not answer, immediately starting to open it, and it opened immediately. And Ren had already managed to get scared, because he thought that this really was a coffin. The dragon in turn did not understand why he was screaming. But the guy just changed the subject, asking what she had in her hand. She explained that this jade letter was left by her master, who said that his legacy was kept here. Ren was surprised that the master left her. She also explained that his grave is located here, because in the last battle he chose to fight alone. A man appeared in her memories and said that if he died, she should find a new person and bring him here. In the end, the master was unable to return, and she was forced to terminate her contract with him, causing her powers to fade. And all this was until she met Ren. Therefore, this legacy must belong to him. The guy touched the thing, and its paths instantly fell off. And individual pieces of the scroll flew up to circle around the hero. His body began to absorb everything that was embedded in this legacy, and the mind moved somewhere inside itself. He found himself in the field where Ju's former owner was now sitting. Ren immediately greeted him, and he, without ceremony, immediately asked if the guy knew how to drink. But the hero didn't know what to answer, and suddenly something flew into his chest. This thing was moving at such a speed that he had to try very hard to stop the object. But after a couple of seconds, he finally mastered this force. And I saw that it was just a bowl of alcohol. He drank the contents immediately. Next, he wanted to ask the man a question. But he interrupted him, saying that the guy was a very bad drinker. However, his strength was satisfying. The man suddenly became much more furious and asked why the Jew core was in Ren's body. At that moment, the hero felt a murderous aura. But through force, he told his story of betrayal. The man looked at him suspiciously, and the pressure on the guy increased many times over because he couldn't believe him. Meanwhile, Ren's body stood still, and sweat flowed from his forehead. Ju couldn't understand why his heart was beating so fast, but she wasn't going to deal with it, so she just sat and waited. After some time, the doors suddenly opened, and the girl asked what was in that letter. Ren explained that he had met with the master of the demonic beasts. He remembered how he had questioned him, but Ren didn't give up and still tried to justify himself, saying that they help each other with Ju, and he is ready to die for her. The man only smiled in response, and then he said that the guy was smart enough, and therefore hoped that he would remember their meeting. The man immediately summoned some writing in the air, and said that Ren needed to remember this, because these were the secrets of controlling the beasts. And after their training, the master asked the boy to take care of Ju. In fact, the fact that she gave this letter to Ren and explained everything like that. But the man still had some doubts. He didn't have much time left, so the guy had to remember everything as quickly as possible. After this, the letter lost its force, and a little later the guy asked Ju if it was really necessary to do this. She explained that the master loved this place during his life. However, everything comes to an end, and so Ju borrowed the boy's body, and directing her power she brought it down on the stones. She blocked the passage, and Xiao Ren respectfully said goodbye to his master. Meanwhile, in another part of the world, interesting things were happening. The action moved to the beast sect. There the master gathered several demonic wolves, who fought with each other, and among them only one remained. But upon seeing the man, he immediately attacked him. In the man's opinion, this was quite impudent, and so he immediately reined in the arrogant wolf. He wrapped his whips around the beast's body, and suddenly someone else emerged from under the water. It was a sea serpent that also decided to attack the master. But a tiger, Ren's former beast, rushed towards him. However, his strength was not needed, because the master immediately pierced the snake with his energy stakes. Energy began to squirm out from the owner's fingers, and the snake was also entangled in energy. But a second later, the beast disappeared completely. The master's power compacted the entire physical shell of the snake, and in its place only the core remained. Heavenly beast cores have proven to be extremely useful. They not only increase a man's cultivation several times over, but can also improve various beasts. After this, the master turned to his disciples, asking how things were going with the preparations for the meeting of the Immortal Alliance. They immediately came to him and said that the other sects responded to the meeting. But there was one thing. This idea was not liked by the other 3 large clans of the Shenmeng clans. The man said that since the beast sect dominated their alliance, he didn't care about the rest. He gave them black kernels, and if anyone opposes them, they will have to kill them. The boys obeyed his order. Meanwhile, outside it was night. Ren found a place to rest and made a fire. He withdrew into himself, remembering the ways of controlling the beast from the beast sect, where they taught that man is the master, and the beast is the slave. However, today he learned from the man that the true way to control is to become a friend to the animal, to unite the 2 souls. After all, when they and Ju can truly merge spiritually, their power will give rise to unlimited possibilities. Therefore, the master decided to give Ren the last of his strength to help them. And finally, the guy must trust his companion, and the man will look forward to them sowing discord in this world. Given the boy's current powers, he couldn't fully understand his legacy. However, the spiritual strength that the teacher gave him will still be of great use to him, and so he immediately began cultivation. In front of him was the city of Shifan, to which he was heading. The beast sect master's disciples also wasted no time in training. They consumed the kernels that the man gave them and cultivated them. Meanwhile, the blonde released 2 streams of energy at them, and energy monsters immediately appeared from their bodies. They were very happy with such unimaginable power, and we are grateful to our teacher. He helped them break through to the boundaries of the original yin level. But now they have to practice on their own. Li Gen had a firehawk, and Nangong Qiushui has a devilish serpent. Now they had to show everyone what they were capable of. A little later, they left the building, and Li Jian asked his brother if he was excited. He said that he was really looking forward to the completion of the tower for sacrifices to the beast. Meanwhile, Ren and Ju were also in the sect's territory. The girl said that his teacher had good taste, but he sharply replied that he was no longer his master. Everything Yin Wangting says is dirty and vile, and Ju was glad that her master had become more balanced. The people at the next table were discussing some kind of sacrifice ceremony to a beast. The sect stole the show at the alliance meeting, meaning it will be hosting the ceremony. Besides, even the other great sects said nothing. They also mentioned a traitor who had not yet been caught. Ren heard everything he needed, but suddenly he saw a crowd, and I decided to go there to see what was going on. However, Ju did it for him. She learned that the ceremony was necessary so that the head of the sect could subjugate the ancient evil spirit. In this way, he will establish his authority. The hero decided to attend this event. After all, this is a rare opportunity to see something like this. Ju wanted to have fun while they weren't being chased. Meanwhile, the guy was remembering his new master's request. He needed to obtain the Heavenly Beast Core before invading the Alliance Hall. Suddenly, he saw the bodies of men flying in front of him. They flew back and hit the ground with a loud thud. They were beaten by the Scarlet Fury sect's disciple, Chu Yan. He didn't like the way they talked about the Beast sect in that way. After all, for his sect, she was the main one in the Immortal Alliance, and they dared to speak so arrogantly about her. The bench he overturned knocked one of the men down, and Chu Yan walked up to him and pressed his foot down on him so that he couldn't get up. He wondered if he would continue to talk nonsense, and the man asked why his sect had not been so daring before the rise of the Beast sect. This greatly offended Chu Yan, and without holding back his strength, he applied it towards the lying man. However, someone interfered with him. The guy heard a voice and stopped abruptly, and then he ordered Ren to reveal himself. The disciple was very surprised that he was able to stop his heavenly fire palm. The hero called himself Shuang Yue. However, this did not give Chu Yan anything. He justified his actions by saying that their sect was the strongest, which meant no one could insult it. But Ren did not listen to him, but helped the victims. Chu Yan was offended again and decided to take action. He immediately attacked the main character, but after some time he was already standing there beaten and reporting the incident. Ren also took the invitation to the ceremony from him. The head of this boy's sect didn't like this state of affairs, and a little later, Li Jian ordered the old man to sort out this misunderstanding. Having reported to their superiors, they left. The boy was surprised that they would not ask the Beast sect for help. The old man said that they would deal with him themselves, because the hero apparently wanted to attend the ceremony. Then he shut his student up, and immediately told him not to rely on the so-called alliance. Li Jian watched them go and understood what the old man was thinking. There are a lot of vile people like Gong Sunfeng and Xiang Meng now. However, the ceremony will soon take place, and everyone will see how powerful the Beast sect is. Later in the evening, Ren checked into a hotel, and one of the servants visited him and went away on his business. The guy breathed a sigh of relief, and Ju was interested in why he was so nervous if he communicated normally with Qin. The hero was simply tired of talking. Today they were very lucky to have received an invitation to the ceremony. A Jew suddenly said that she was very glad that Ren did not become impulsive and irritable when he came here. But he urged her not to worry, because the path of his revenge was very long. Suddenly the girl asked what kind of ceremony of sacrifice to the beast would take place later. The Beast sect has many ill-wishers in the city, and therefore their master apparently wants to demonstratively assert his influence. The girl was afraid that Ren would start his plan right during the ceremony, but he calmed her down. The recently beaten man was sitting with his friends at that time and discussing the guy, but suddenly he caught contemptuous glances at himself. One of his friends hit him, and the man flew into the wall. He didn't understand why they betrayed him. They also explained that they had already submitted to the Beast's sect. True, the man was not going to put up with this. However, one of his friends simply cut his neck. Ren woke up from his sleep. He was surprised that he fell asleep in such a position. Meanwhile, Ju was busy with health treatments for her skin. The hero asked her if there was any noise, but she heard nothing. But he immediately decided to take a walk, because he was anxious. Meanwhile, the two men wanted to kill Shuang Yue, and instead of fighting, they decided to put poison in his food. But Ren was already right there. He heard their conversation. They tried to justify themselves by saying that it was their friend who wanted to kill him. But the guy explained that he heard absolutely everything, so he decided to punish them. The disciples tried to restrain him. One entangled Ren in sandy bonds, and the second wanted to throw a spear, which was dangerously close to his head. However, the hero was not at all nervous. He decided to cleanse this place of this rot, and the men reacted to his transformation with nothing other than a wave of horror that washed over them. Meanwhile, the hero swung, and the men, like the wall behind them, were pierced by a huge diamond dragon. It was all over in the blink of an eye. Meanwhile, the Beast sect master felt something familiar. A little later, the action moved to the Baihua sect. Sect leader Miao asked sect leader Baihua about the upcoming sacrifice ceremony, but Zheng Changxi wondered why the old man was so interested in her opinion. Suddenly, they were interrupted by a voice that appeared nearby. Qin came back and greeted the teacher, and she stood up and walked towards her with a displeased look. The green-eyed one promised never to secretly leave the sect again. Mu Chungshu walked up to them and smiled at the girl, realizing that this was the same student that Changxi was taking care of. The woman immediately ordered the girl to greet the head of Mu, and she obeyed. Then she began to tell about her trip to the gorge of 10,000 animals. The woman thought she had met some cute little animal. However, Qin said she was underestimated. After all, this time she met Xiaoren. They couldn't believe their ears, but she confirmed her words. Zheng Changxi decided to take her disciple away, so as not to discuss this with the head of the other sect. The old man looked after them. Therefore, I thought that Xiaoren was probably the only weak point of the beast sect right now. Meanwhile, people had gathered in the morning before the destruction that the hero had caused. People were curious about who was targeting the beast sect. Li Jian also came here and looked at the destruction, and later he took off into the air. He saw echoes of power that remained after the blow, and so he decided to touch this cold spiritual power. He immediately realized that it was Xiaoren, who was called Shuang Yue, and this information had to be immediately reported to the teacher, and so he immediately went to the main house of the beast sect. Ren was watching him from the crowd. He informed Zhu that someone had already started searching. Having seen everything with his own eyes, he hurried away. Meanwhile, Li Jian reached the master, but the doors in front of him opened on their own, and he flew into the passage, and thus he flew to the center of the hall. His master was training at the time. He said that his cultivation doubled thanks to him. He liked the effect of the heavenly beast core. Li Jian was happy for him, but was in a hurry to tell him the news. He reported that Xiaoren was in the city, and the blonde just laughed in response to this. The guy didn't understand this reaction. The teacher realized that Ren wanted to attack them during the ceremony in order to bring the sect to its knees. Jian also realized that if he did this, the rise of the beast sect would be interrupted. The blonde understood that Xiaoren was not a fool. However, he will not be able to stop them, because the beast sect is now the head of the alliance. So he ordered Li Jian to deal with it. After all, no one dares to interfere with the rise of the beast sect. Meanwhile, Ren was wandering around the courtyards. He felt that several observers were following him, and it really was so. They exchanged gestures, trying to figure out if the guy had an accomplice. But then they decided not to deal with it and immediately attacked him. Ren could tell from their fire that they were Li Jian's men from the Scarlet Fury sect. And the man who was in the air began to throw fireballs at the guy. And at the place where he was, a powerful explosion was heard. The second man also decided not to stand aside. But Ren only calmly parried the attacks in response. And someone was already watching their fight. Liang and Chu Yan watched them carefully. The first one decided to have fun with him on his own before the ceremony began. Meanwhile, the two men had already been defeated, and Zhu reported that there was another attacker. Lian rushed to attack and created a fire weapon in his hand. A golden sword formed from the fire, and the man was about to avenge his fellow students. And striking in front of him, he created a wave of fire that flew straight towards Ren. The hero easily dodged this, and later asked who the blonde man was. He also introduced himself as the young master of the Scarlet Fury sect, Gongsun Lian. Ren had never heard of this sect, and thought that they were the dogs of the beast sect. And the blonde mentioned Li Jian, and said that he was right in his assumption that the masked guy came from some village. The hero heard the name Li Jian, and realized that Lian was still a dog of the beast sect. For these words, the blonde decided to take his life. He also claimed that his sword could melt gold and cast iron. A second later, a wave of flames headed towards Ren, and so wide that he couldn't dodge. Another explosion was heard in the town. Meanwhile, Li Jian was standing on the balcony in the main house. Qushui was glad that his brother was inspired, but Jin said that he had just ruined his mood. However, in Qushui's opinion, Ren would spoil him even more. After all, the guy has become stronger, and until the guy with the snakes reaches the Yuanying level, he will not be sure that he can defeat him. However, Jin could not understand his brother's message, and he explained that he did not want his colleague's power to be so senselessly destroyed by Ren. They must kill the guy together, and then they can compete fairly for the position of the next teacher of the beast sect. However, Jian was thinking the same thing. He wanted to compete with his brother, and also added that the Scarlet Fury sect meant nothing to him. They are hypocritical and unworthy of being his dogs. Later, he decided to leave, because he needed to prepare for a fight with Ren if his subjects failed. And he thought that until they killed the hero, he needed to peacefully coexist with Qiu Shui. Meanwhile, the battle in the city continued to rage. Ren had already managed to change his appearance. The blonde was quite surprised by such changes in his appearance, but surprise immediately turned to anger. And while he was attacking, Ren tried to show him as little of his strength as possible, so he only used as much as was needed to repel the attack. The two forces clashed and an explosion occurred, and the blonde thought he had won. But Ren didn't understand where he was going to go. After all, his fire wave didn't harm the guy at all. The blonde realized that the fight would not be so easy, and so I didn't hold back. Ren also went on the attack, and he used Yue's shadow, splitting into several copies. The blonde recognized in this a technique for creating a new body from his own, which only immortals possessed. But the next moment he attacked all the shadows at once. By that time, Ren had prepared his next attack. He used Zhuyang's breath, and a huge beam of flame immediately rushed towards the blonde. He couldn't believe the attack was so powerful, and he didn't want to die either. Even though he was the son of the head of the sect, this did not protect him from the blow. Ren landed on the ground a second later, and in place of Liana, there was a small crater. The hero himself was surprised by his strength. Ju explained that this is the power of the inner core of the beasts, and Ren said he liked it, and then he decided to run away so as not to be noticed. He thought that this power would be enough to take revenge on the beast sect. The action moved to the tower for the ceremony of sacrifice to the beast. Jean stood on the balcony and was surprised at how many people had come there. And all this is only thanks to the heavenly core of the beast. He wondered if Ren would dare to appear here. However, the boy decided that no one here would interfere with the teacher's plan. Meanwhile, there were also many people in the arena where the beast was sacrificed. And Qin was here too. And her teacher reminded her that today, she could not be hot-tempered. She had previously told her what Ren had said. However, the woman could not resist the beast sect. However, Qin still wanted to somehow repay the guy. She decided to find out everything herself. Meanwhile, the beast sect leader's disciples stood in front of the doors. Having bowed, they waited for him to come out. He came out, and was glad that the Immortal Alliance and cultivators were waiting for him personally. From today on, the whole world had to obey them. The man was also curious whether Ren would dare to come to them. He mentally addressed him, and the guy was really going to take action. After going out to have lunch, he paid the old man. He thought that Ren would participate in the ceremony, and he said that today the world will change, because now it will be the world of the beast sect. But the guy didn't agree with this, and then he jumped high into the air. The old man was surprised by this, but in his mind he thought that if it weren't for his bad knees, he could have done the same. Meanwhile, the hero was running across the rooftops of houses. Ju felt how excited he was. He was going to show Yin Wangting's true face to the whole world, but one still had to be wary of traps. The girl was worried, but about the fact that they would not be allowed to feel the joy of revenge. However, the guy was confident in his abilities and was going to give them a real nightmare. Meanwhile, the students announced the beginning of the ceremony, and Yin Wangting appeared before the people. He came rushing on a flock of dragons. Besides, he controlled them all, and he stood on Dragonhawk, the destroyer of the skies. A moment later, the blonde jumped off him, and having landed, he greeted the guests. A bird immediately took flight behind him, and people recognized in her a wonderful bird, which was a spiritual bird, signifying a good omen. Everyone was surprised that the blonde was able to subjugate her. Suddenly, he turned to all the guests again. He intended to perform the ceremony himself, and tell everyone about two things. He said that he had killed an ancient demonic beast, and using the sect's secret method, he had obtained its cores. Therefore, he would like to take advantage of the situation and give one of the students a core. However, the condition for receiving it was the murder of the traitor Ren, who was located on their territory. The men immediately tensed up. Qin was also surprised by this. She thought that this whole ceremony was to lure Ren here. Meanwhile, the hero had already been found. He was met by the head of the Scarlet Flame sect, whose son had recently been wounded. There was no point in wearing a mask now, since he was already recognized. The old man was furious and promised to take revenge on the guy. But Ren only replied that no one would stand in his way, and their fight began immediately. But in the guy's eyes there was only excitement, and explosions began to thunder throughout the city. For Ren, this battle is not so easy. He did not show his strength, and therefore the old man allowed himself to dominate this fight. The red fire truth technique immediately appeared in his hand, and Ren needed to dodge this as quickly as possible. A fiery tornado immediately passed across the ground. The old man immediately thought that he had killed the boy, but suddenly his face distorted. Several gens immediately ran out of the smoke. The old man was very surprised by such an unusual technique. The hero's copies began to rapidly disappear due to the attack of the sect leader, and during the battle, he wondered why no one at the ceremony noticed that a fight was going on here. The old man noticed that the guy was distracted, and so he decided to attack, and the hero immediately flew into the wall. Ju offered to help him with cold against the fire that had entered the boy's body. Suddenly, the old man voiced the same question that was in Ren's head. And later, he showed an oyster in his hand. She can create an illusion. The guy immediately recognized this thing. Li Jian gave the old man more than 1,000 of these oysters to set up an illusion here. Baldy was curious why the beast sect spent so much money for the boy. And Ren, surprisingly, immediately told what happened between them. The old man decided to spare him in order to use him later against Yin Wangting. But he will have to cut off the hero's hands. Otherwise, the soul of his late son will not find peace. Meanwhile, a man's hand had just been cut off. Jian did it with just one movement of his palm. All the assembled guests were very surprised by this. Now the guy bowed to them and asked if there was anyone else who wanted to fight him. And his teacher stood with the head of Mu and asked what he thought of his student. Later, the blonde thought that Chief Zeng, in turn, did not approve of Li Jian. She said that he was too cruel. But the head of the beast sect merely turned it into a joke. He said that he teaches his students cruelty to opponents, but kindness to allies. The old man confirmed these words. And the blonde felt sorry that the heads of the two other strongest clans did not agree to take part in their ceremony. Chief Mu suggested that he take a break from this and watch Li Jian's next fight. Yin Wangting understood that the old man was only pretending to obey him, and the woman was completely passive. But at least these came, because the other two brazenly refused to take part in the ceremony. He was going to exclude them from the alliance, but for now he needed to deal with Ren. He really wanted to see the boy's severed head after the ceremony. He in turn fought with all his might. He asked Ju for help, and she said that she had been ready to help for a long time and was just waiting for his call. He began to transform, and the old man was again surprised by the hero's new techniques. Finally, half of Ren's body was transformed. Now the old man understood how he was able to repel his attacks. The hero lost a lot of time, and therefore he should have acted faster. The old man heard their conversation, but could not understand who he was talking to. Suddenly, energy balls appeared in the air. Ren immediately directed them at the enemy, but he couldn't understand what it was, because there was no such technology in the entire Mortal Alliance. He tried to defend himself with his fire. Meanwhile, a certain shadow was watching them. She said that she had not been in the human world for a long time, but his journey was worth it, because what he saw was unexpected. The guy had finished his attack in the meantime, but Ju asked him not to relax. The old man survived and was about to attack. Having broken through the wall of the house, he rushed towards the guy, and he reached out to him with his fiery hand. However, the hero defended himself from her with his own hands. The old man said that he didn't expect this. Such a young guy was able to hit him, which was very surprising. Now the bald one has switched to his fighting form. Shadow was curious whether the hero could withstand an opponent of the Yuanying level. The hero made a contract with the demon, but there was one catch. Even in the demon world, there was currently no sign of the demon with whom the contract was made. Zhu told the boy that they had to take the initiative to defeat the old man. He merged with her, and his body became even more covered with a black crust. The guy immediately made a dash and attacked with hurricanes. But the old man was ready for the blow, and wove a blade from fire, holding it out in front of him. A huge fiery sword struck the hurricanes flying at it. They fluttered under the onslaught of his power, and the hero had to hold back the old man's attack with his hands. But a moment later he destroyed it with a fiery blade, and he spat out blood. At this rate they were in danger of losing. The old man decided to turn to Ren. He offered him a compromise: the guy would tell about his strength, and the bald man would help settle the feud with the beast sect. However, Ren had no intention of tolerating those who stood in his way. He began to gather fire in his throat, and the old man immediately felt that something was wrong, and the guy suddenly spat a stream of hot flame at him. The fireball flew at him, and he formed a blade again, and simply cut the attack in two. Ren's attack power was weak, so the old man was already prepared for victory. But the guy suddenly attacked him like a mad beast. For some reason he looked like a demon. Meanwhile, Qiu Shui praised his brother mentor. Jen is done with duels. And the blonde said out loud that the heads seemed to have already received the results of the duel at their ceremony. Headmaster Mu said that Yin Wangting had good students, and he was confident that the younger generation was in good hands. From today onwards, the position of the four major clans in the Immortal Alliance has changed greatly. The two brothers, meanwhile, passed each other. Jin said that he shouldn't be upset, because next time their master will allow Qiu Shui to win. And he in turn decided to visit Ren. Yin Wangting and the other leaders came down to praise Jian, and he thanked the blonde for the praise. In response to this, Qiu Shui only chuckled quietly, and later he galloped across the rooftops towards the battlefield. Although Gong Sunfeng was only the head of a small sect, he was already at the Yuanying level, so Ren should have already been dead. But when he saw the battle, Qiu Shui couldn't believe his eyes. Ren pressed the old man so hard that he had to defend himself. Moreover, his fighting method was similar to that of a demon. Zhu tried to bring him to his senses, but he didn't succeed. The force simply controlled his mind, and the old man suddenly asked Qiu Shui to help him. The guy, however, with some arrogance, decided to help him. Energy immediately appeared in his hand, and the shadow that was watching them didn't like that he wanted to get into a duel. He transformed into a human, and declared that Ren was under his protection. Meanwhile, he was turning more and more into a demon. Zhu tried to get through to him, but she couldn't. However, someone's voice asked her not to worry. Before Qiushui attacked them, a light appeared behind Ren. Having transformed, the shadow stood right in front of the guy. But he couldn't understand who stopped his attack. It was a man wearing glasses. He gently poked the air with his cane. The guy recognized him as a Yuanying-level peak master, because he was able to stop him and Gong Sun Feng. He asked the man who he was, but he only paid attention to Ren, now understanding why the demon liked the guy. Qiushui began to get nervous. Zhu realized that the man saw her, and he continued, saying that she was the only surviving demon of disaster. 1,000 years ago, he knew her master when she was very young. Once he even fought with her teacher, but now was not the time for stories, because Ren continued to rage. However, the man asked Zhu not to worry. He used the transparent castle technique, and golden paths immediately enveloped the guy. Zhu thought that he was being attacked and asked him to spare them, but he explained that he did not intend to harm him, and at that time Qiushui asked that the traitor be handed over to him. In response, the man turned around and shut the boy's mouth. Under the pressure of such force, he actually fell silent. After all, the demon emanated a truly terrifying aura. The old man, meanwhile, suggested that Shusha attack. The guy agreed with him, wanting to send the bald man into battle alone. People immediately released their auras, and they attacked instantly, and the demon realized that he would have to deal with these gnats. Meanwhile, the old man menacingly declared that he would kill him, but the demon caught his fiery blade with one hand. The difference in strength amazed the old man. The man materialized a clot of energy at the end of his cane, and he sent a black hole towards the old man. Subduing space and time, she absorbed his body, and soon his head was inside the hole. And a little later, the remains of the body. The light of a firefly cannot compete with the light of the moon. Meanwhile, the man was thinking about something, but even without turning his head, he felt that Qiushui was trying to sneak in. The guy thought that he would not be seen because of the created illusion. However, he was going to take it off so that they would come to his aid. He continued to threaten the man, and he decided to remove the illusion himself, and the transparent walls suddenly began to disappear. The guests suddenly heard a noise, and Yin Wangting felt the aura, which looked like they had been hit by a natural disaster. The blonde recognized demonic energy in her, and he called the heads of the sects to follow him to see what had happened there. The three immediately rushed to the spot. Qin hoped that Ren was okay. A few seconds later, the heads were already near the former illusion, and then they landed. They saw Qiushui lying down and Ren, who was enveloped in the demon's power. The blonde asked who the man was, and he realized that they were the heads of the Alliance sects, and therefore decided to let them know who he was. He explained that he was the Lord of the Moon, one of the 4 lords of the demon world, Uemo Guhan, and he came to prevent the suffering of people on Earth, and this means that the Immortal Alliance must bow before him. The blonde read about the confrontation between immortals and demons, but after that the latter were sealed in a deep abyss. In this world, everything is divided into 2 classes, good and evil, immortals and demons. From the very beginning of the path of cultivation, there is a division between them. Cultivators use the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, and demons take away the power of other people and thus cultivate. As a result, a terrible war broke out between them 1,000 years ago. The demons lost, but promised that they would definitely get peace back. And since the war had taken a heavy toll on the immortals, everyone hushed up the story. Meanwhile, the demon voiced his proposal again. The old man suddenly recognized him. He realized that this demon lived more than 3,000 years ago, and therefore he began to doubt. However, he said that his identity was not in doubt. By releasing his aura, he revealed his true form to the world. Even the people in the square saw this figure. Jian, meanwhile, was very scared, but he thought that his teacher would handle everything. He also reassured the guests by saying that Yin Wangting was strong. They listened to him, believing his words, but Qin didn't think so. She decided to see for herself what was going on there. At this time, the blonde also released his aura, standing on his authority. The leaders recognized in his power a stage of great completion, which was higher than at the previous meeting. And the demon was surprised that in the world of people there was someone like him. Then he decided to give instructions to the master of the Immortal Alliance. Summoning a small moon, he attacked with it. The blonde said that he underestimated him, and then he decided to show the power of his celestial core. His spiritual energy flowed like a full-flowing river, and the leaders realized that they had to run away from here. Meanwhile, the demon hit them with ice, but Yin Wangting protected them by transforming the energy into a dragon turtle. It was surprising, because the blonde could summon 2 beasts at the same time. The demon had not yet reached the peak of the heavenly demon stage cultivation, but the difference between him and a human was obvious. The blonde said that if he handed over the traitor, the man would be granted an easy death. The white-haired man became interested in what this boy's story was. He already had great power. A Ren suddenly spoke up, furiously ordering Yin Wangting to return his core to him. Meanwhile, Zhu invaded his thoughts and tried to wake him up. Suddenly, she saw energy flying out of his forehead. The remnant of her master's spirit that lives in Zhen appeared before her. After all, the hero goes through the same difficulties that he went through, and therefore he left a trace of his mind in his body. He touched Ren, asking him to wake up, since he had promised not to harm Zhu. Then the man said that she had chosen a good man, and having dissolved, he asked her to help him further. Finally, the guy opened his eyes, and Qin ran towards him. She tried to bring him to his senses, but he was still going crazy. He had already extended his hand towards her, but she closed her eyes. However, the guy suddenly woke up. The blonde decided to attack him before he fully came to his senses, but a demon immediately confronted him. He decided to protect Ren because he had disagreements with the Alliance, and this would help him become the man's faithful assistant. The demon enveloped himself in energy and said that if the hero wanted to live, he should jump after him. The blonde tried to stop them. The energy almost hit Ren and Qin, but they jumped up. Finally, the demon created a portal again, which appeared right under the teenagers, and they fell into it, and the funnel slammed shut a second later. Yin Wangting couldn't believe that he was able to escape. Meanwhile, they appeared in the demon world. The white-haired man was breathing heavily, but he managed to escape. He didn't expect that the beast sect would have such strength after 1,000 years. The power of the heavenly beast was restraining the cultivators of demonic power. This had to be reported to the Lord immediately. He didn't know where Ren had been transported to, but he hoped that everything would be fine. Meanwhile, he was lying in the passage between the worlds. He looked as if he was dying. It was dark all around. He stood up and leaned against the dark wall, and she dug her tendrils into him, trying to steal his strength. His spiritual energy immediately flowed into the wall, and he tried to jump back and fell to the ground again. He didn't understand what it was, so he asked Zhu, but she did not answer him. Just like Qin, who disappeared along with her. Zhu had a contract with him, so it was strange that she wasn't here, but her energy remained with him. The guy decided to go inside himself. And then I saw Zhu, who was sitting in some kind of barrier. He tried to break through to her, but she didn't respond, and the guy couldn't understand what had happened. The hero said in fear that she was connected to him by life and could not leave him, and she grinned in response. And the barrier immediately disappeared, and his hand suddenly accidentally touched something soft. She said with a grin that her owner apparently really liked her human form, but he sheepishly apologized and said that he didn't mean to do it. He said with feigned anger that they didn't know where they were, and she dared to play a prank on him. But she said that she knew where they were, namely, in the only passage connecting the demon world and the human world. It was called the Road to Nowhere. However, it was clear that they were not safe here. They could not return to the human world, especially considering their strength, since the demonic abyss was now sealed. Then their only option is to go to the demon world. Besides, countless deceased souls along the way had already smelled their scent. Suddenly, skeletons began to emerge from the dark wall, and if they stay any longer, they will definitely die. The guy suddenly suggested sending Zhu immediately, and she agreed with a grin. Ren later took on a demonic form. The souls recognized in this appearance some other person, but he said that he was not who they took him for. And later, he went to the entrance to the demon world. Zhu asked if her master was afraid of the new world, but he said that together they had nothing to fear. At this time, Qin was screaming at the top of her lungs. She was greeted by local residents, but then she suddenly fell silent when she heard them speak. She asked them where she was. The little demons realized that she was not from here, so they said that this was Dongyuan village. The girl said that she had never heard of such a village, and added that she had never been to the demon world. And then I realized the meaning of what was said and understood that it was precisely in him. A stunned scream echoed throughout the area. Ren was met at the entrance by other inhabitants of the world. These bears possessed a golden core with above-average cultivation, and their throats made the air shake, and they immediately pounced on the guy. But he was much stronger and faster than them. However, one of the attacks almost got him, but Zhu covered him from behind, and Ren suddenly used the demon shadow technique. The bears had a strong and indomitable power, and therefore it would be good if the hero could absorb them. Frozen in the air, he summoned numerous clots of energy, and he hit the crowd with them, but someone was already watching their battle. An old man saw that a man had appeared in the demon world, and so he decided to test his abilities. The bears, meanwhile, were defeated, and the blonde, being in another world, was breaking everything that came to hand. He was extremely unhappy that Ren was able to escape. The blonde said that he was ashamed in front of the bosses, but he would soon go looking for the guy. But the old man said that the Alliance needed him, and therefore he should continue to develop his strength. Chief Zeng remained silent, thinking that it would be a good idea to take advantage of the situation to weaken Yin Wangting. However, she later said that her favorite student was in danger, and therefore left the decision to the two heads. And she immediately disappeared in a flash. The old man wanted to tell her something, but didn't have time. He said nervously that he supported Yin, but now he had to leave. The blonde remained in the room with his students. He said to the leaders that they couldn't have an opinion, because now he was the strongest among them all. After all, this is a world where the strongest have the most rights. He was also glad that Ren had gotten involved with demons, because now it was easier to blame him. He then ordered the disciples to announce the Alliance's order that all sects were to be informed of the invasion of the demon world. They also needed to be informed about Ren's connection with the latter. They were glad of this order, and soon they went outside. Kyushui asked his brother what the consequences of connecting with the demon world would be, and he said that such people are killed and buried without a tombstone. Yin Wangting was looking forward to dealing with Ren later. And whether he is alive or not, soon he will be unable to do anything against the blonde. Meanwhile, in the demon world, the red moon was shining, and Ren walked and carried the beast's cores with him. These were 4 cores of mid and high-level beasts. There was just one thing that made Ju unable to stop laughing. His hair became electrified from fighting the thunder creatures. She offered to help him with this, and his hair was suddenly enveloped in energy. She was able to get his head in order. He wondered why she hadn't used this technique before and why he didn't know about it. And she said that she was a girl, and this spell was so that she could admire her face. But suddenly someone interrupted their conversation. Someone came to them again. There was a sense of energy nearby, and from the forest a roar came again. And above the edges of the forest a huge figure of a bear appeared. It was a Thunder Bear King who possessed a top-tier heavenly core. Grandfather was still watching them, and he thought that he would be rewarded if he brought the man to prison.